Hey, BassGeek here, and I've got 6 myths about bass and their movements that I want to share with you. It's going to help you catch more fish. What is up, fishing geeks? Listen, I know some of you are dead set against forward-facing sonar. I know that some of you don't have it, and I understand it's expensive, but here's the great thing about it. I get to go out and use it and share what I learn about fish movements over the seasons. And I'm going to give you 6 myths about bass that I have seen with my own eyes, and I'm going to share with you that I've learned using forward-facing sonar. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is fall when it comes to predominantly largemouth lakes. And what we've really found when it comes to fall and bass movement, you always hear the bass run up the creeks. Now, a tip for you, you always want to make sure there's active water. Those are the creeks that you're going to find the bass. But we find that as soon as the temperature starts to drop, the bass start to move early. It can even be the tail end of August in my area on the Highlands Reservoir. Now, that's going to be very different for you. It's going to happen when that nighttime temp starts to drop, and that water temp starts to drop from its high. So you just need to pay attention to that. So what we found is there's kind of 2 different sets of bass, and the big groups, there's the main lake groups, and a lot of times they're not going to move up and into a creek arm. They're going to move to some other location, whether it be down toward the dam if it's a smaller lake, or just somewhere else that they have access to some really deep water. Now, the bass that do move up in the creek tend to be seemingly residential bass, and what ends up happening there is as the lake drops, as the summer comes, they'll move out to the mouth, to the main lake, to the first third, and then as the temperature and the lake begins to drop, they'll kind of move halfway back. There's a ton of shad in those creeks, and that's where they'll feed. So myth number 6 is that all bass move up into the creeks during the fall. Some of them just live out on main lake, and most of the time it's 2 separate groups of bass that are doing these things. Now let's talk about summer bass. At least summer bass, and I think this is proven to be true a lot, is that we've always thought that the bass that are active are on the bottom. And man, if you go back, I've got videos talking about how to catch suspended bass in the summer for years, well before forward-facing sonar. It's kind of been one of my little expertise areas. I've done it for so long. But bass don't actually, the majority of bass in the summer don't go deep. You could tell if you watched us on Top Secret Lake F last year, we were catching bass over deep water, but they were only maybe 10 to 15 feet deep in huge schools, and we were using top water in the middle of the lake to catch those bass. A lot of times once the shad spawn, they actually move out and start feeding on those shad. Some of them feed on those small shad fry, but a lot of times your bigger schools are roaming, feeding on those big shad in open water. So they're actually not as deep as we used to think they were, the majority of them. And that's my number 5. We're kind of moving backwards into the seasons, and something else that's really not surprised me, because I fished for smallmouth on this Highland Reservoir that we're on today forever. And it's that, and this was actually discovered kind of by the pros when they went out. I don't remember who it was, if it's NPFL or Bassmaster Elites or MLF. I don't remember who it was. But anyway, they went to Kentucky Lake this year, and they were catching smallmouth on the bed out in deeper water. And we know that smallmouth spawn deeper, but what we've also learned is that the largemouth will spawn deeper than we thought also. And there's a prime example of this. We were fishing a rocky point earlier this year. We'd kind of missed the primary spawn, so we were catching the males, and we were just throwing and catching. We could see them on forward-facing sonar on this point. We knew that they spawned there and fished this spot on this lake for years, and we were catching them out in 15 feet of water. Now, we were catching a few up shallow, but the beds were just kind of all over on this rocky, sandy point, and the smallmouth just were everywhere on the bed. And that's myth number 4, because we even caught largemouth on Top Secret Lake P bedding in 13 feet of water. All right, geeks, so something else that you need to have, and I'll tell you, I love it. Yes, you can go in and it can tell you, give you some ideas about baits, but that's not what makes the Deep Dive app, to me, incredible. It is the weather, it is the wind, it is which banks are getting beat and how bad the waves are, which is a new update by them, and it's pretty incredible. It is the barometric pressure, so it's going to tell me where and how, and there's nothing any more important than that, than fall fishing, especially when you got a little bit of wind blowing like right now, and I can pick up those top waters and go fish those wind-blown banks and catch some toads. Check out the Deep Dive app, links in the description. One of the things that really amazed me, and this is more about bait fish, we have been on several lakes. Now, this lake that we're on right now, there is a herring, kind of a herring, and it is an alewife, and they'll go extremely deep, and the smallmouth will go extremely deep with them. On a lot of the other lakes around us, it's only shad. And shad are either gizzard shad, but predominantly it's going to be like alewives and American shad. And the one thing about those threadfin and those American shad is no matter how cold it is, they like that UV radiation heat. And they will be as shallow as they can get in the coldest temperatures of the year. And when they're there, you can bet the smallmouth and the largemouth will be right there. During early spring, it's even more pronounced. We were fishing a lake earlier this year in February. Literally ice on the guides. It was 4 or 5 degrees out that morning, maybe even colder than that. Some of the days it might have been even down into the upper 20s. But what we found, and this part blows my mind, these bass would be 4 and 5 foot deep under the surface, and the shad would be 4 and 5 foot deep. They would be busting. I caught a few bass, but I literally seen a largemouth, about a 3-pound largemouth, turn his body sideways chasing shad, going by the trolling motor to keep from breaking that surface. So they will not break the surface. Now, I don't know why. We threw top water at them. I mean, any other time you'd think they would, but there's something about that insulation of that surface that the shad and the bass most of the time won't break really early in the year. And for me, that was a largemouth lake, and the myth that in cold water, largemouth are not active. So one of the things that we've really found, especially during the summer, now there are certain times of the year that bass will follow contour lines, but there's certain times of the year bass will just follow shad, and that is largemouth, and that is smallmouth, and that is spots. They don't care anything about the depth or the contours. They're not sitting on them in wait. They are out there swimming. We found that to be the case in largemouth pretty much any time of year other than the spawn. We found in late fall, early winter. We found that to be the case pretty much any time when it comes to smallmouth. At least on the Highlands lakes that we're fishing, a lot of times what ends up happening with smallmouth is they just follow the shad. Now, there's always going to be different groups, which is something else we've learned, and those different groups tend to stay in their areas that they prefer. They're going to live on humps and bluffs, that sort of stuff, but you're going to have some pelagic bass that are just never going to really care about the contour lines And that's something that I know a lot of you believe. And I've heard pros kind of say this. They're like, do they follow contour lines? Yeah, but not as strictly as we used to think as far as them following the highways. So myth number 2 is contour lines. A lot of times the bass are not following contour lines, but they're following shad, probably 80% of the year. So let's talk about cold water. Now we're going to talk about largemouth first, and we kind of covered this a little bit in the fall. I don't know what it is about largemouth, but right around that 60-degree mark in my area, I don't know if it's like they feed up. I don't know if it's they know that the turnover's coming. It seems like at one point though, they kind of stop and go to the bank. The shad, for whatever reason, kind of spread out. They'll go deeper, but overall, for at least about a month and a half, until the bass really realize that they're hungry and they need to feed again, which seems to generally happen sometime in January, late January, and they'll start really feeding again and end up very shallow, because the shad will get up shallow to enjoy some of that early season sun. And that's something that if you look at some of my old videos, we would talk about taking advantage of with jerk baits earlier in the year and shade lines, because what we were doing is, especially out on points, taking advantage of what we were thinking big females were out there sunning, growing those eggs. What we know now is that they're turning the feed bag back on. They are out there sunning, but they're very active. Smallmouth, I don't think they ever stop feeding. They'll either go deep after alewives, again, which is a herring, or they'll stay around all winter long, those shad, and based on how deep the shad get. And regular shad don't get that deep. And if it's a sunny day, they're going to be up to right under the visibility line. And that means if it's 3 foot of visibility, you can bet those shad are probably going to be 3 to 10 feet based on the size of the bait ball. But we even seen last year, early February, the bait get up so and spread out so wide of an area, you could see them better on side imaging than you could down imaging, because they spread out across the surface so much. So really interesting seeing that even on our down and side imaging. But basically, we have caught smallmouth in 80 feet of water in wolf packs feeding in balls of shad. So are they lethargic? They're not. Bass are not lethargic during winter. They are going to feed. And what we found about smallmouth and what we found about largemouth, there may be groups that are firing up at different times during the day, but they're feeding. And you can almost always find some of them that are feeding all day long, every single day. All right, geeks, I hope that helps you target areas. We're going to do a lot of how-tos this winter when it comes to cold water fishing. We hope to show you some of this stuff. We've got, a playlist of fishing videos. You can go back and check out some of the stuff we were talking about. But I think right now, something that you geeks need to check out is the correct way to gain confidence in new techniques and lures. And to do that, make sure you go check this video out right here. Otherwise, questions, comments in the comment section below. You geeks tell me what you've learned from forward-facing sonar that surprised you. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell, and you geeks rock.